So in acknowledgement of the storm, I thought we could start with this poem by Rosemary Tromer called Walking the Garden After the Storm. This is about a hailstorm, but nonetheless has some Dharma in it. Such delicate green tatters, the hail-shredded leaves of chard. I am not surprised, beneath my disappointment, to find them beautiful. Not surprised that the heart should recognize itself here in the lace. The storms come again. Beauty is not what has been battered. Beauty is not what has not been battered. All around us, resilience. New life emerges out of its own destruction. Already, only 2 days after the hail, a dark wrinkle of new green forms in the center of the chard. I pull away the old leaves. It doesn't matter if the heart asks for a second chance. There is no limit to the chances, though they may not look like anything we ever thought we wanted, and most of the time we don't notice them. Beauty is the willingness to offer our attention, to wander the world, forgetting to want something more than what we find. So maybe there's something for all of us in there to reflect on in terms of things being a little battered right now in some ways, and the possibility of finding beauty in that, and also finding beauty in what emerges from that. But in terms of inspiration for this talk, when I found out this morning that there would be some opportunity to share the Dharma today, I immediately thought of something that arrived for me in the mail a couple days ago from a friend of mine that I've been marveling at. And I thought, here's an opportunity for show and tell. So they're all saying, my God, what could it be? Let me tell a little bit about it first. This is a set of palm leaf manuscripts that were found, believe it or not, at a garage sale in another state. But they're such an amazing thing. They were said in a label on them that they had Buddhist texts on them. So they look like this. See, there's sort of a bundle of them. And the string goes through the text. It goes through each page. That's the binding. It has no other binding except the string. And there's sort of a solid wood piece on each side, and then a whole bunch of palm leaves in between. And so my friend did a little bit of research to try to figure out what are these things, because Buddhist texts have often been transmitted on scrolls like this throughout many millennia, a couple of millennia now. And so he had them checked by a friend. I'll show you when I finish talking so I can focus on being able to put them up to the camera. They're in a script that's not anything he recognized, although it looks Southeast Asian. So they're in Thai script, and the language they're written in is Pali. So it's Pali written in Thai script, and they contain at least one Buddhist sutta. So the friend who looked at them identified the Mangala Suta, which is a well-known text from the Pali Canon. I don't know if you're going to be able to see the writing or not. You see that pretty well? Yeah, it's got a little, you can see the writing there. So it's this script. You can probably hear the crinkle of the leaves also. So it's estimated to be 100 to 200 years old. This thing, I could share. The real thing is better to look at, but I can also, maybe I will in a moment, share the screen that has some photographs of it. So it's kind of a treasure. Here, let me get that up actually. I was surprised to hear about it. And then it was, of course, very nice of my friend to send it. Of course, we'll pass it on to, some appropriate place that will be able to use it, like a monastery or something. Let's see. Oh, hang on. And this is only part of what I wanted to share. So don't worry that we're going to have half an hour of this, but let me show you. Can you see that? Yeah. So that's kind of cool, right? It's Pali and written in Thai. I can't read Thai. I don't know if anybody here can, but there's several of I have some pictures. And it's pretty cool. This palm leaf, I mean, 100 to 200 years old. I don't know how they preserved it, but it's pretty neat. It looks like there's several different hands. This to me looks like a different person writing than the previous one. And then that's maybe yet a different person's hand. So this is clearly something that's been put together, assembled, if you will. I don't know what all the sources are, only the one my friend sent a picture to someone who reads Thai, just one of these pictures, and from the amount of text on this screen, the person could identify that it was the Mangala Suta, but it's not like somebody who reads Thai has been through and read this whole thing. There's something showing the binding. And then there's one place that has a little red mark, so that's interesting, right? What is that? We don't know. So there's a little sort of archaeology possible here. You know what? This is to me, it feels very human. There's something human and beautiful about this. Here, let me stop this. About this set of whatever it is, how was this used? Who were the people involved in this? What were they doing with it? And what did they think about it? We have our ideas about it, but, what did it mean to them? So I'll just share a little bit of kind of what's coming up for me as I touch into it, and also kind of expand my mind to what thoughts go with this. For me, it's meaningful personally as I find meaning in the Buddhist texts. For me, I teach a sutta class at Insight Santa Cruz, and have been touched by reading some of these texts, now translated into English, thanks to a bunch of other people in this whole mandala of people involved with this. And I think about how they were transmitted orally for several hundred years. They weren't even written down like this for a long time. And who knows, things can change over time, although in that culture, they were, of course, much better at memorizing than we are. And so that was a strong cultural aspect of India at that time, is that the Vedas were being transmitted orally. That was considered very sacred. And so the Buddhists had the same idea to do things that way. And so I think it was relatively accurate, but then it got written down and copied and copied and recopied. This one's only 100 to 200 years old, but how many times back did it have to go to get to? It was basically the turn of the Common Era when they were first written down. So it's about 2,000 years. And I think about all the people who found enough meaning in this to do that with part of their life energy. Interesting to spend a life that way. And what's contained in the texts has been meaningful to people in their practice. Even the forms that we have here in the West, things like MBSR are based on the ideas in these suttas, because they offer us ways of practicing with our mind and ways of living our lives, whatever life we're in, that are wise and skillful and good and will help to disentangle us from the things that bind us up and bring suffering. So it has some wisdom maybe about how to be a good human, how to do this human thing well. We didn't get born with an instruction manual, but maybe some things like this can help a little bit, even for us. So for me, there's kind of a sense of history, and yet it brings us right into here, this moment. This came from Asia, which is where a lot of this stuff came from, but we've lived something different from that growing up. And what sort of symbols are useful for us? Should we just say these are some Asian thing. We need to create Western versions that work for us. Some people are doing that, and it's good if that's helpful. What is really meant by all this religious symbolism? Because, I've talked about kind of the touching, moving parts, which feel good and wholesome to me, but we know that religion has not always been a force for wholesomeness in the world. It has many difficulties that it's created in the world also, kind of get both. And so how do we navigate that for ourselves? Do we want to be involved in an institution, in a group, knowing what groups do? But do we want to be alone and, doing our own thing because that's going to be the most meaningful for us, and yet then it's a separate thing. So there's also some complication in thinking about religion, and even if it's not religious for you, okay, so then we have the religion of this is not religious. I only do Buddhism because it's a philosophy or because it's a psychology, but it's still a meaning. It's still a meaning that you're putting onto that, your meaning. And so, and are we okay with other people having other meanings, or do we need to defend our meaning? We're going to be upset if somebody doesn't share the same values. It gets quickly quite intimate and personal and maybe vulnerable to think about the power of these things and our sharing with each other and our trying to do the human thing well together. I think these things are always cultural. What we create is always cultural, and we're learning now about ways in which our own culture has certain biases in it, and yet, and maybe we need to look at that more carefully. What sort of biases are wrapped up in this beautiful text, and yet it is beautiful, isn't it? So I think there's a lot to reflect on. I mean, when I don't have any grand summary, but I do think from my practice and teaching and experience in the Dharma and long retreats and living in regular life and all of that, I think I would say that we need doorways. We need something. We can't have nothing. We need groups. We maybe even need spiritual symbols. Behind me is the Buddha. Texts that help us, maybe even long transmissions over time of something that's meaningful. But none of that is it. All of that is what creates the doorway. And then there's the stepping through the doorway to see what's on the other side, but maybe to see the emptiness of doorways and to the frame that the doorway creates, something that we can step into that is nothing, that is empty, and there's some freedom. Somehow the freedom is in the emptiness, which is defined by the doorway. I think we go through a lot of doorways in our life, and even Buddhism talks about doorways. It talks about, in particular, doorways to the Dharma, the doors to the deathless. The Buddha said, the doors to the deathless stand open. I think the invitation is that we then have to step through them. But maybe I'll just name the 3 doorways that are named in Buddhism. One of them is impermanence. So the doorway of looking at change, looking how nothing really persists in the world. These scriptures have lasted 100 to 200 years. I don't think they'll last forever. I don't know if they're perfect copies of what came before. So things shift and change over time, and there's something liberating if we can really understand that. I mean, really understand it at the level very deep in the heart. That things change, they have to change. We will have to change. We've already changed. We'll die. Everyone around us will die. And that sets us up to live in a different way. and maybe not to attach so much to the things that are naturally slipping through our fingertips. So that's one doorway to freedom, is to examine very carefully impermanence and inconstancy. Another doorway is to look at what's called unsatisfactoriness or dukkha. The fact that life is difficult, not because we just want to revel in how hard it is and we're, looking for what's hard. Sometimes our mind will do that, but that's kind of the unskillful version. If we look very carefully at everything is changing, we see that nothing itself could provide ultimate happiness to us. And this sounds paradoxical, but it's such a happy discovery to realize that. It lightens things up, because there is happiness. At this moment, there's a certain amount of happiness. I'm delighted to see all of your faces on the screen. I feel happy. So it's not that doesn't exist, but where does it come from? And so really looking at suffering and happiness, at what is really the source of that, also liberating. It's a doorway that can help us step through into that space. And then the third doorway that's named is the doorway of emptiness, of insubstantiality, of nothing really having an essence. Corelessness, it's also called. It's a direct consequence of impermanence. If nothing persists forever, there's nothing that could be said to be substantial. And again, it's not like there aren't things. There's this cup, I can drink the water out of it. Of course, the emptiness is what makes the cup useful. But, there are things, but there aren't really things, are there? And so that too is an amazingly happy discovery, because we get so much lighter about the things that there are, and so much lighter about their passing. So this too is a doorway. When we look through it, we see, there's a space, there's something to step into. So maybe part of our search in life is the search for our doorway. What is the doorway that works for you? What's the one that is meaningful enough that you're going to be willing to step through it? I think there are doorways everywhere, but they're not all ones that are the right one. So part of our life is our spiritual life. Once we decide that that's of interest or of import, something in the heart, I think is looking for a doorway. And so we find that somehow through the stuff of our life. And then though, there's the second part, which is that stepping through the doorway, committing to that emptiness in a sense. And what is it that we need that's substantial, that surrounds it, that will draw the heart through? So the Buddha says that we have quest in life somehow, quest for a holy life, he calls it. And he takes that seriously. He offers means of doing that, training the mind, studying, learning, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the things that we take refuge in that somehow create our doorway. But he's also very clever. Even in these texts, it says that freedom is the end of quests. So we don't have the quest anymore. When we've stepped through the doorway, there's no more stepping. But this eightfold path that we're given helps us create our doorway and step through it. So I think that might be enough words for a subject that doesn't have so many words. There's a lot of words here. And I don't know. think words are also a doorway. So hopefully there was some doorway there for you. Maybe I'll finish actually, since the only text that we know for sure is in this bundle is the Mangala Suta. I looked up, I have a copy of that. There's my Mangala Suta. We could take a look at that. Okay, so the Mangala Sutta ends this way. One whose mind does not shake when touched by worldly conditions, sorrowless, dust-free, secure, this is the highest blessing. Those who have done these things, meaning walking the path and stepping through the doorway, are victorious everywhere. Everywhere they go safely. Theirs is that highest blessing. I would welcome any questions or comments. Val.
Kim, it was kind of funny when you were showing us the text, which is, I find really exciting. That's really delightful. I'm so glad you shared that. And you said it's such a history, and you were saying it's such a, and you hesitated, and you said history, and I said mystery out loud here at the same time. And I thought, yeah, it is such a history and mystery both, and very exciting. And I'm interested that the fact that it was written with the Thai script, but it's in Pali. So who would be right? Excuse me, it's not in Pali, it's in Thai, there's no Pali written. But it's just, anyway, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that would make sense. Yeah, it's just a copy of the sutta, so it would have to be, yeah.
It was presumably written in Thailand. It was purchased in Laos, apparently, and somehow made its way to a garage sale here. I didn't give its whole history. But you said something important that I think it's worth repeating in the group. It's correct. That Pali does not have a script. It was an oral, it's only an oral language. And so Pali is always written in whatever script you use. And so this, for example, this Thai Pali is no more authentic than Pali written in Roman script, in English script. They're equivalent. I met somebody in Sri Lanka who had tried to learn Pali in Roman script because she happened to be fluent in English, and that was the class she was taking was in English. But she was Sri Lankan, and Sinhala was, of course, her native language. And she said that when she started to learn Pali in Sinhala script, it was so much easier for her. So that's in some ways, I like the fact that Pali is the language of Buddhist texts because it is by its own nature flexible, adaptable, can only be used, is meant to be used in the culture that it's in, as it doesn't have a native essential script. Yeah, Anne.
Could you read that last piece of the Mangala Suta again, please? It sort of whisked by, and it did for me, and it did seem to tie together a lot of what we were sharing. If you would mind reading it again.
Sure.
Thank you.
One whose mind does not shake when touched by worldly conditions, sorrowless, dust-free, secure, this is the highest blessing. Those who have done these things are victorious everywhere. Everywhere they go safely. Theirs is that highest blessing.
Yeah, that
relates
to the storm. Relates to the storm.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it relates to the storm. I mean,
it does relate to the storm. We can walk through the world with all its changing conditions without our heart being swept away by that. That's real safe. That's safety. Not creating something that doesn't have any changing nature. Yeah, the Mangala Sutta is about the highest blessings, quote unquote. Mangala means blessing. And it's the setting is that someone comes and asks the Buddha, what are the highest blessings? And he goes through a long sequence of things that form a path, essentially. You know, they start with knowing what's worth it in the world to pay attention to and to venerate. And then it goes through living a good life, starting to train the mind, doing deep mind training and letting go, and finally returning to the world. Those last lines are about returning back, and having stepped through the doorway, one can walk through the world. Yeah. Thank you, Anne, for tying that in. Gee.
Yeah, I I really appreciate your talk, Kim, and just interesting. I'm just feeling very touched by this. What would you call this? This sutta. That's
Scriptures, I think they would be called. Yeah, palm leaf scriptures. Yeah.
Yeah. Just that, you know, the effort that went into that, and also the different cultures that are involved. You know, obviously a Thai culture and through Laos, and I've done some traveling in Asia.
Yeah.
And there's something very powerful about seeing this practice practiced in a different culture. Somehow that the heart is the same, though the words are different and a lot of the practices are different.
The forms are different, yeah.
Forms are different. We certainly see that with Zen. There's these different doorways, you know, different forms that different people choose. But it's all, there's something underneath all of that we're all kind of connected or tapped to, and it's very touching to me. It points to something deeper than this beautiful form. Yeah, form is, I love it, and there's something but it's more than just the look of it, of course. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that scripture into our practice, and yeah, it was lovely.
Thank you. Well said. Anything else on your mind? Okay, well, I think maybe we'll just dedicate the merit then, that's a little form that we inherited from Asia, an idea that we can take what is beautiful from what we've done, and the idea that we would share that then with others somehow. And we don't have to know exactly how it works, but we can wish that as we encounter other people today in our lives or over email or Zoom, that something of our practice touches them also, that our kindness, our openness in some way is helpful and maybe spreads out from there in ways that we can't even see. Just like the people who wrote that scripture did not know that it would somehow be shared to a bunch of people in the Bay Area in the West. 100 or 200 years ago, probably that person writing didn't even know about North America. So there we go. So may all beings somehow touch into what these texts point to, what's underlying all of them. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings everywhere find freedom. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Kim.